It's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, on top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
The FIFA World Cup played in Italy in 1990 was the 14th edition of what many call the greatest show on earth. If you're a big fan of the Olympics, sorry about that, but I've got to agree with the football fans. It was a tournament filled with passion and memorable moments. Luciano Pavarotti's unforgettable performance during the opening ceremony at the San Siro, the roar of the indomitable lion, and the dance of Roger Milla as Cameroon shocked and wowed the world. Paul Gascoigne's tears when he realized he wouldn't play in the semi-finals, and Maradona's disappointment as defeat in the final to West Germany meant that the mercurial Argentine missed out on immortality. That's the story we are telling here on ZiFM's Sports Power Profile as we continue our series on the most memorable FIFA World Cups in history. Good evening, Zimbabwe. Welcome to it. My name is Mike Madoda, and with me is Alois Munjira, Chris Midzi, Barry Manandi, and our producer, Sean Tafirinika. It's Throwback Thursday. Before we get into the World Cup profile, let's get some local sports news.
The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
Here's a local sports news roundup starting with golf, where Zimbabwe professional golfer Robson Chinoi believes his putting is not yet back to the level he wants, despite winning the 7th leg of the 2021 Safari Tour Pro Golf Series yesterday. His latest triumph came at the Par 71 Nyali Golf and Country Club course in Kenya by a single shot. The informed golfer is doing well in Kenya, where he has been camping out after being frustrated by lack of competition here at home. On to basketball news. The Basketball Union of Zimbabwe, Buzz, will in a fortnight honor players that excited in the past decade. Buzz will reward the Team of the Decade, Player of the Decade, and People's Choice Player of the Decade. To be eligible, a player should be a Zimbabwean citizen who has played in a top-flight league, be it in the domestic or international scene. Let's wrap it up with news from the top tier of domestic football. That's the Casalaga Premier Soccer League. Remember that? We actually have a top division of football. Now, former Highlanders striker Tinashe Makanda was among 5 new signings announced by Dynamos yesterday. Makanda was first reported to have joined Dynamos in October last year, but the player's handlers refuted the claims despite a picture of him donning a white t-shirt with a Dimbare logo circulating on social media. The other new signings at Dimbare are Trevor Mavunga, the fantastic centre-half from former Ngezi Platinum Stars centre-half Frank Makarati, and Norman Sianchali, who crosses the great divide from Caps United to Dynamos, and then the Prince Edward Academy graduate Luke Musikiri.
Hi, I'm Warriors coach Zdravko Logarušić, and you are listening to ZiFM Sport.
Sports with a difference. Z.
This is Mateus. He's taken it on in a strong surge. This is Fuller, goes down, and this time it will be a penalty. Andreas Bremer has potentially got the chance here to win the World Cup. Up against Goicoechea, who was Argentina's hero in their shootout win against Italy in the other semi-final. Just 5 minutes of normal time remaining, and Andreas Bremer puts Germany in front. He shrugged off all the pressure and produced a perfectly executed penalty kick. The whistles shrill around the Stadio Olimpico, and there it is, the final whistle. West Germany are world champions. Wonderful scenes in Rome as West Germany celebrate and Lothar Matthäus and his teammates are given a night they will never forget.
Now, starting last week, we began our power profiles here on ZiFM Sport. This particular series is centering around the FIFA World Cup. Last week was about 1966, won by England. And today we're celebrating Italia 90, which was won by West Germany after defeating Argentina 1-0 in a hard-fought tense affair at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. It was a rematch of the 1986 World Cup final in Mexico. Host Italy, who had lost to Argentina in the semis, took third place after beating England, who finished the tournament in fourth. It's a tournament that featured 24 teams, 52 matches, 115 goals, 18 penalties, 16 red cards. And Barry Menandi, I'm going to start with you because, listen, you're no longer the wee nipper you were in 1986 when the World Cup was played in Mexico. You're a lot older. What are your memories of that World Cup played in Italy?
Sure. Look, it's easy to remember because I think I would probably say, and this is not knowing about how well 1986 did, but certainly in terms of the marketing of the game, I think Italia 90 was the genesis of actually marketing World Cup. So I think we lived through it beyond the football. There was I remember a local bubblegum manufacturer ran a competition where you could collect stickers, and that became a tradition for subsequent World Cups, and the whole build-up to the World Cup was so fantastic. So by the time it started and that opening ceremony started, we were ready. Well, our palates were wetted sufficiently for us to receive it. So you could remember things like Luciano Pavarotti at that opening ceremony, which in truth was a spectacle all on its own. Italy did so well, and then Italy themselves, the home side, the way that they played. Yes, they played the traditional catenaccio, but when they went forward, my goodness, it was a sight to behold. Toto Schillaci, those are the memories that I think we remember. Yes, the winners ultimately were West Germany, but in truth, the teams that led up to that final were very entertaining, and those are my memories of that World Cup.
And it was more than just the stickers, Barry. I think they also had the playing cards as well, which you could collect with the different stars from the nations that were participating at the World Cup over in Italy. And I remember when you talked about the marketing, I remember the year after, which was in 1991. And one of our teachers in primary school actually got a videotape, a VHS of the World Cup, and he would show us. It was a series of the FIFA World Cup in 1990, and he would show us those matches on weekends, and it just captured the imagination. Alois, I'm going to come with you to you here, and one of the things that's talked about the 1990 World Cup in Italy, Italia 90, as it's iconically known as, there's some people who say that it's the poorest World Cup that was played, especially when you consider goal mouth action. It generated just an average of 2.2 goals per game, and that's a record low that still stands.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. Italia 90 was not very good, when it comes to goals. Sometimes when we watch football as fans, we want to see a lot of goals, but it wasn't so. I think it can actually attribute it to the defensive tactics that were being employed by teams. It actually started with the very first game of the tournament, Italy versus Argentina. Argentina versus Cameroon. We could actually see the defensive aspect of the game throughout the match, which was applied by Cameroon, the tackles that were flying in, and it epitomized the whole tournament, because the whole tournament was just awash with those flying tackles, boots flying all over, and the crunch tackles that were being meted to attacking players. So I think that's what restricted teams from scoring a lot of goals, because most teams focused more on how to defend than how to go out and win games by scoring more goals.
Now, teams were definitely very defensive and aggressive in defense, which meant that the flowery players and artists wilted as a result of the physical onslaught. And I'm going to give you some stats here. In the knockout stages, many teams played defensively for 120 minutes with the intention of trying their luck in the penalty shootout rather than risk going forward. Two exceptions were the eventual champions, West Germany, hosts Italy, the only teams to win 3 of their 4 knockout matches in normal time. There were 4 penalty shootouts and 8 matches went to extra time in the knockout stages. It just shows you how defensive teams were. But for Africa, Chris, it was all about our emergence. We were almost like the bridegroom arriving at a wedding. Cameroon and Egypt, especially Cameroon, and their phenomenal performances in Italy.
Definitely, and it was like Alo said from that very first match, the performance by Cameroon, they beat Argentina 1-0 in that opening match. And the thing is, no one had expected that kind of performance from Cameroon, and they went on to top their group, get to the quarterfinals. Roger Miller, one of the standout players for Cameroon as well, 4 goals, and he was at the age of 38 at this point. So for Africa, having a team that went that far and performed that well throughout the competition, I think surprised a lot of people. But for Africans, I think it's the best thing to come out of it was that FIFA subsequently decided to allocate Africa an additional place for the next World Cup tournament. And it was because of those performances by Cameroon and Egypt that made Africa stand out, and Africa had come to compete at a World Cup.
You talked about Roger Miller. He was 38 years old. He wasn't even meant to be going to the World Cup, but a personal plea from the president of Cameroon saw him get on the plane, and he became one of the stars of the tournament. Let's hear excerpts from Roger Miller's Italia 90 documentary.
Roger Miller made his FIFA World Cup debut at the 1982 finals in Spain. It was the first time that Cameroon had qualified for the finals, and they were full of optimism. Cameroon failed to qualify for the 1986 finals in Mexico, but 4 years later they were back. So too was 38-year-old Roger Miller, and his entry into Italia 90 could hardly have been more dramatic. In the opening match, Oman Biek's mighty leap led to the only goal of the game. Cameroon had created one of the biggest shocks in FIFA World Cup history, beating the holders Argentina 1-0. The Africans' next match against Romania was petering out to a draw until Millar's timely intervention. He opened the scoring in the 76th minute, and 10 minutes later showed great pace before thrashing in his second. Cameroon won the match 2-1 and progressed to the last 16. The second round match against Colombia in Naples established Miller as a true FIFA World Cup hero. Yet again, a dull match was sparked into life by the introduction of the veteran striker. In the 106th minute, Colombia's eccentric goalkeeper René Higuita left a glaring gap at his near post, and Miller exploited it to give Cameroon the lead. The next goal, just 3 minutes later, was more about comedy than serious theatrical drama. Indulging in his well-known habit of dribbling the ball upfield, Higuita was dispossessed by Miller, who accepted the invitation. Miller celebrated with his trademark dance by the corner flag, whilst Higuita wished the ground would eat him up. The indomitable Lions won 2-1 and became the first African team to reach the quarter-finals. In the last 4, Cameroon faced an England team that included 1986 Golden Boot winner Gary Lineker and the supremely gifted Paul Gascoigne. Cameroon were 1-0 down at half-time and once again would need to call on their super sub. True to form, Roger Millar's introduction turned the match on its head. In the 60th minute, he was fouled in the penalty area by Paul Gascoigne. Emmanuel Koundé scored the resulting penalty to give Cameroon a deserved equaliser. 4 minutes later, Miller created another goal, releasing Eugene Ekike, who clipped his shot beyond Peter Shilton and into the net. England were in disarray, and Cameroon on the verge of an incredible victory. In the 83rd minute, Gary Lineker salvaged England's FIFA World Cup campaign by winning and scoring the resulting penalty. In extra time, he did the same, sending his country to the semi-finals for the first time since 1966. The final whistle signalled the end of an enthralling contest and the end of Millar's adventure.
Z.
Roger Milla Berry, undoubtedly one of the stars of the tournament. It just wasn't the goals he scored, but it was also that iconic dance by the flag post in the corner, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And you know what? In this stats generation, I think his stats look even better. Because, yes, we talk about him scoring 4 goals, but at the same time, you look at his minutes per goal. It was fantastic because remember he was a substitute. He made substitute appearances for Cameroon, so he was awesome. And he put the cherry on top of those goals with, as you quite rightly mentioned, that dance in the corner flag, which became iconic because it almost rubbed salt into the wound of their opponents when he scored those goals, and important goals they were for Cameroon as well. So Africa and Cameroon coming into their own at Italia 90.
Absolutely, and of course that statement win over world champs Argentina in the opening game. I mean, it meant that Argentina were giving themselves a very long and hard look, but this was a very different Argentina, wasn't it, Alois, to the one that we saw in Mexico. I mean, whereas they were in Mexico, they were a free-flowing attacking team. Maradona was at the peak of his powers, but here there were more artisans than artists. Maradona was decent, but the team was average.
Yeah, to be honest, they had a better team in 1986, far much better than the 1991. Like you were saying, they were now playing more like a constructive game. They were now playing a more tactical game than they were playing, because in 1986 they were free-flowing. Maradona was all over the place. Even Maradona himself, he was not as efficient as he was in the 1986 World Cup, where he was actually slicing through the defenses and running from 90 minutes from pillar to post. But now they were just playing.
Let me tell you something, Alois, just to add to what you're saying. Maradona failed to score at Italia 90.
Yeah, he didn't even score a goal. So that was actually the difference. And then there was nobody to actually help him out, to take over from him, but they actually did well. They did well to actually reach the finals, and they actually beat the worst Italy in the semi-final as well, which was actually one of the most interesting aspect of the 1990 World Cup. But like you say, they were not the exciting team that they were in 1986. And when they got into that 1990 final, they were not the favorites. West Germany was definitely the favorites to win it, and they surely did.
We qualified out of the group as one of the best placed third place teams, so it was like squeaky bum time for them in the round of 16. They played versus Brazil. They were absolutely battered, but their keeper kept them in it, and they did a smash and grab late to send their South American rivals packing. Their passage to the finals was then secured by 2 penalty shootout victories in the quarters and semis. They scored just 5 goals in the tournament, and they had 3 red cards, the most at tournament. So it was a very defensive Argentina, an Argentina that failed to capture the imagination. And many people will say that they were lucky to even make it as far as the final. The team that vanquished them in the final, Chris, was a lean, mean German machine. It was the most attacking team in Italy, and many will say that fully deserved of their victory. West Germany.
Definitely a lean, mean machine, very well-oiled machine. They scored a total of 10 goals in the group stage. They thumped the UAE 5-1 and Yugoslavia, a very good Yugoslavia side, 4-1 as well. And then they went on to beat the Netherlands 2-1 in the round of 16. It was a bit of an ill-tempered affair, but also if you take a look at that Netherlands team, it was one they definitely wanted to beat. It was almost a final before the final. One of the more exciting matches in this tournament as a whole. It was really a team that was full of goals.
Full of goals, Barry. Let's take a look at that game versus the Dutch, Barry. I mean, Chris has called it the final before the final, and that is so right, because in terms of free-flowing attacking football, these were the 2 best sides in Italy, and one got the feeling that the one that walked away victors would go on and win the World Cup, and that is exactly what happened. But I want you to touch on the Italian influence in both teams.
Absolutely. That was the reason why it ended up being an ill-tempered affair, because it was a mini Milan derby, wasn't it? Because you look at on the one side, and on the German side, you had Jürgen Klinsmann, Andreas Bremer, you also had Lothar Matthäus, who all turned out for Inter Milan at the time. And then on the Netherlands side, you had Ruud Gullit, Frank Rijkaard and Marco van Basten, who were all AC Milan players. So that sort of rivalry then added to an undercurrent of almost a grudge match, notwithstanding the fact that these were two of the best sides in the tournament, two of the favorites, and everybody sort of thought to themselves, whichever team won this game would ultimately go all the way minimum to the final and possibly even lift the trophy outright. So I think that undercurrent sort of drove the rivalry, as it were. But it's important to note that these two teams were very, very good technicians. They had very, very good players amongst their ranks and goal scorers. You look at Klinsmann, you look at Van Basten, they're very good goal scorers. In fact, Marco Van Basten, one of my favorite goal scorers of all time.
Alois, you know, in tournaments like this or in competitions where teams are being defensive, it's often important that you have a goal-scoring midfield, and that's one thing that both the Germans and the Dutch had. I know we can talk about Van Basten. Barry's, of course, a favorite striker of all time, and we could talk about the likes of Rudi Voller and Jürgen Klinsmann. But if you take a look at behind those players were midfielders that could score. The Dutch had Ronald Koeman. They had Ruud Gullit. Those were goal-scoring midfielders. And then the Germans had the iconic Lothar Matthäus.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. When you are playing in a tough match, in a tough World Cup, in a tough tournament, you always need that, because there is a time when teams get defensive, they always look for your target man, they always look for your goal scorer so that they can shut him down. But if you have got that player that is coming from behind to actually push forward and score, you've got an advantage. Like you rightfully said, they had Ronald Koeman, who actually scored a few goals for the Dutch as well in his career. The Germans had Lothar Matthäus, one of the most decorated footballers in the world. A lot of people don't give him enough respect, but that guy is one of the most successful because he played in 5 World Cups and he was scoring goals for Germany, was driving them. So you need those kind of players when you play, because there is always going to be a time when your striker can't score goals, he's shut down, and you need that nippy midfielder to come through to score goals. And those two teams had both those teams had those kind of players that took them forward.
Well, the rest of the route to World Cup glory saw them beat Czechoslovakia 1-0 in the quarters. They then beat England in a semi-final penalty shootout. The Germans were perfect from the spot, while Chris Waddle and Stuart Pearce missed for the Three Lions. Germany then, of course, playing very good attacking football. Lothar Matthäus actually finished with 4 goals at that tournament, whilst Klinsmann, Voller and Bremer had 3 goals each. And they were managed, Barry, by the legendary Franz Beckenbauer, who became the first man to both captain and manage a World Cup winning team.
Absolutely, Mike. And when we're looking at iconic managers and iconic players, you got to talk to your Franz Beckenbauer, not only because of that record of winning it as a player, captain, and as well as a manager. You look at how he set up his team, how he played the game with the beauty and the entertainment that we fans love to see.
Now we've got to talk about England because this was the last World Cup in which England made it as far as the semi-finals, then under Sir Bobby Robson. They had some really, really good players, but none better than Paul Gascoigne, Chris.
Yeah, Gaza, he played like a continental player. I think that's what made him different. There was a lot of skill, a lot of flair. He was entertaining, and I think it earned him respect in the tournament. He didn't play like your the traditional British way, which is very strong, aggressive, and as a result of that, he stood out, and it also earned him a move to Lazio. Gary Lineker as well, another brilliant player, and after this tournament went over to Barca, and basically these players opened up the way for English players on the continent. You had your McManaman, David Beckham now also moving across, which was something that previously hadn't happened, but because of this tournament and because of their performances, they were able to do so. Unfortunately, of course, for this England team, their luck ran out against West Germany. But for those players, they had really skillful players.
They had some really, really decent players. Of course, another one who benefited from Gaza's exploits in Italy, Paul Ince, who went on to play for Internazionale. Alois, that's one of your nicknames, isn't it? Gaza.
Yeah, that's one of my nicknames, Gaza, because I was named after Paul Gascoigne. by virtue of just loving the guy, because I actually had to write my soccer boot, the Puma boot. I wrote it Gaza. That's how it started, because I liked the guy. I just liked the way he played football with a smile. He used to smile, and if he dribbles you, he would laugh at you. He was just such a character, and I loved it.
That sounds like a young Alois Mujira in the early 90s in the Casablanca Premier Soccer League. Well, it was a fantastic tournament. We talked about Gary Lineker. He ended the tournament on 4 goals together with Roger Miller, and they were trailing the top scorer, the Golden Boot winner, Salvatore Toto Schillaci of Italy, who scored 6 goals. Like I said earlier, Maradona failed to score at Italia 90. The most goals were from Germany. They scored 15. The least amount of goals, Egypt and South Korea managed just 1. But I guess for Egypt, Barry, it was all about the experience. It was all about participating at a FIFA World Cup.
Yes, it was. It was about participating. It was about making progress and strides. And I think what we then saw subsequent to Italia 90 is the benefits that Egypt had for going to this tournament. Because I think in later years, you then see the dominance of Egypt on the African continent and beginning to be serial offenders when it comes to qualifying for the World Cup. So I think this one was just about the experience.
Well, let me just throw this in there for the young generation that don't know or don't respect the exploits of the Dream Team. Well, I can tell you that these 2 teams coming from Italia 90 as the 2 best teams on the continent were beaten in the National Sports Stadium by the Dream Team. Cameroon going down 1-0 and Egypt going down 2-1. These were teams coming from the World Cup. Zgarara Mugomba. But anyway, let me move on. Best young player, Robert Prozineski of Yugoslavia, went on to play for both Real Madrid as well as Barcelona. And then he had a swan song with Portsmouth, where the man was reported never to train, always lit a cigar when he was in the changing room, but he certainly knew how to pull his strings when he was in the English Premier League. The team of the tournament, no surprises there. I think it shows itself. Sergio Goycochea, the Argentine goalkeeper, who was a penalty saver of note, and he got them to the World Cup final. Andreas Bremer of West Germany, he scored, of course, the winning goal when he took that penalty in the final versus Argentina. And then Paolo Maldini, a young left back then, together with Franco Baresi, both of Italy. Dragan Stojkovic of Yugoslavia, Lothar Matthäus of Germany, Diego Maradona, I think a bit of a sentimental pick of Argentina, and Paul Gascoigne of England made up the midfield. And then the attackers were Jürgen Klinsmann of Germany, Roger Miller of Cameroon, and the Golden Boot Salvatore Toto Schillaci of Italy. Those were your finest players in Italy. Those were the players that lit it up more than anyone else. And you've got to say, Barry, that what a tournament it was. One of the most iconic, will not be remembered for its attacking play, for its fair play, but one of the moments that stood out was the performance of Luciano Pavarotti.
It certainly was, and Luciano Pavarotti, our play of the day, will play that immediately after we go around the world in 60.
Hi, my name is Rudoni Shamba, Maitoria's super striker. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
Down underway, the Australian Open tournament director Craig Tiley has said the Grand Slam will begin as scheduled on Monday, even though a worker at one of the Melbourne hotels used to quarantine the players and their entourages tested positive for COVID-19. Today's warm-up matches at the Melbourne Park were called off after the case was announced last night, and those who underwent quarantine at the Grand Hyatt Hotel were instructed to get tested and isolate until they had a result. We'll head over to Cameroon, where Morocco will defend their African Nations Championship title against Mali in Sunday's final in Yaoundé after the holders thrashed Cameroon 4-0 in last night's semi-final. The Moroccans were simply too good for the hosts as a double from Sofiane Rahimi, either side of goals from Sofiane Bouftini and Mohamed Ali Bemama scored a comprehensive win. Earlier goalkeeper Djigou Diarra and Mamadou Koulibaly were the penalty heroes as Mali beat Guinea 5-4 after the first semi-final ended goalless following an evenly balanced 120 minutes at Douala's Jopoma Stadium. We'll touch down in England where Jurgen Klopp blamed mental fatigue for Liverpool's shock defeat to Brighton, while defender Andy Robertson said his side are out of the title race. Liverpool fell to another home defeat last night, only days after Burnley had ended their near 4-year unbeaten league streak at Anfield. Steven Alzate's goal gave Brighton a 1-0 win, leaving the Reds 7 points off leaders Manchester City, who have played a game less.
It's time for us to go, but first our play of the day. Nissan Doma by Pavarotti. Luciano Pavarotti, the late great, and in that opening ceremony, this was the iconic song. And indeed, it's time for us to say goodbye. We'll catch you tomorrow for our preview show. May God richly bless you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Manandi, out.